Okay, welcome everyone that's joining. We'll go ahead and get started in just a moment as folks join our webinar. Welcome everyone. We'll start in just a moment or so. All right, we will go ahead and get started. All right. On behalf of the University of California, Riverside, thank you so much for tuning in today for our virtual industry insights event focused on the nonprofit sector. My name is Brock Cavett, he, him, his, and I serve as the Director of Programming and Career Development in our Office of Alumni Engagement here at UCR. I'm really excited for today's conversation. The nonprofit sector means a lot to me personally, and so I'm really excited for the conversation with our Highlanders. Our Industry Insights series allows folks to gain a better insight into various industries from accomplished UCR alumni in that respective field. Today, we'll be diving into the nonprofit sector and hearing from alumni in the field doing everything from grant writing to volunteer management, copywriting, and so much more. This program is made possible by the UCR Alumni Association, and if you're not currently a member of the Alumni Association, we encourage you to become one and take advantage of all the opportunities your membership offers. It's free to download your digital membership card, and you'll get a reminder in your follow-up email on how to do that if you've not downloaded your membership card yet. Throughout today's session, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions during the second half of today's event. For your reference, we will be recording the session today and we'll send it out after the event in a follow-up email. So if you do have any questions, there's a Q&A right there at the bottom. Feel free to submit those throughout, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of the session. Well, first of all, we'll go ahead and begin today's event with each panelist introducing themselves, a little bit about themselves and their nonprofit journey, and then move into a conversation. We'll address some of the most pressing questions y'all have. So we're going to go ahead and shift our conversation and start to get to learn a bit more about our alumni joining us this afternoon. I'm pleased to be joined by our three panelists, Esperanza Mendez, Tsuda, and Paloma Avila. I'm going to start with a few of the questions we received in advance of the event and prepared, and then again, we'll shift to your questions. So I'm going to now go ahead and allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So background, a little bit about your time at UCR, and what you're doing professionally now. So let's kick it off with Kenny.
Hey everyone, so my name is Tsuda. I was a graduate of UCR in class of 2018. So currently I serve as the digital marketing manager at the Salvation Army for the United States Western Territory. So, in my role, I kind of oversee, digital engagement, fundraising efforts, email marketing and such. Before that, I was working at a homeless shelter in Pasadena, where I served as in marketing roles, volunteer coordination, event coordination. But before that, I actually was in accounting. That was where my background was when I graduated from UCR. So kind of a whole career shift, but really glad to be where I'm at now.
Oh, wonderful. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that career shift in a bit, but I'm really excited to have you and thanks for all the work you do for Salvation Army. Esperanza, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Esperanza Mendez. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I work currently for Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest. I am a UCR graduate, class of 2010. And I graduated with degrees in English and psychology. A fun fact about me, I'm actually a second generation UCR alumni. My parents both went to UCR. So that's pretty cool and really sort of informed my trajectory. I know there's a lot of Highlander energy and at home, but yeah, I'm excited to be here. I have worked in the nonprofit sector basically since I graduated, so almost 2 decades. And I've worked in a number of roles and under a number of issue areas, from housing justice, from one of my earliest jobs was in early literacy. at a library system. And so now I'm at Planned Parenthood and doing their communications work. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and love to see that being a Highlander runs in the family. So very cool to have so many generations of Highlanders. All right, and last but not least, Paloma, would introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Paloma Avila. I got my undergraduate degree at UCR in 2011, and I'm actually back now in my master's, getting my master's, and I graduated in June. Very exciting. Um, I've been working in the nonprofit sector since I graduated in 2011. I've worked in so many different varieties of nonprofits, small to national nonprofits, working in arts, working in culture, working in affordable housing, and now I'm working in the environmental justice sector, looking at conservation, park development, green schoolyards through Trust for Public Land. I work all throughout California, ensuring that everyone has green space access. Uh, my first internship when I was at UCR was with Community Land Trust, and there I really learned about grant writing. But as many people who work in nonprofits, I'm sure know, you wear so many hats, especially when you work for small nonprofits. So I've done program management, I've done evaluation, and on top of that, development as well.
Cool. Well, thank you all again for joining us. Such a wide array of experiences we have here. So really excited to dive in a bit more. So we'll go ahead and start off with our first question. Obviously, the nonprofit sector isn't maybe something folks think of going into when they go into college. And so I would love to hear your stories of, what inspired you to pursue a career in the nonprofit sector. Maybe Esperanza, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the Coachella Valley. For those of you that have not heard of the Coachella Valley, we are a study in duality. And if you have heard of us, it's probably because you've heard of our more luxurious pockets. Palm Springs is a destination for a lot of pit folks. Or most recently, the Coachella Music and Arts Festival, Coachella Fest. So I grew up and we're sort of divided into two ends of the valley. We've got the Eastern Coachella Valley, where a lot of our migrant farm worker communities live, and where I grew up. And then we also have, again, the Western Coachella Valley, which is where Palm Springs or Indian Wells, which has like, I think one of the highest income per capita, like I think Bill Gates. I mean, lots of wealthy people live all over the Coachella Valley, but there's just a higher concentration of wealth on the west side. And a lot of the people that live on the east side kind of go and work in the resorts or in the country clubs or in the places. So I grew up seeing and experiencing and living this duality. And it wasn't until college that I was able to study specifically under, her name is Dr. Tiffany Ana Lopez. She's not at UCR anymore, but I took a Chicano children's literature course with her under my English degree. And I was able to finally sort of name and give names for the things that I saw and witnessed and experienced. And it was like conversations around structural violence in our communities, and what does it mean to have a lack of equity. And so I was all of these things coupled with, of course, just my lived experience. I knew I wanted to do something that was going to be meaningful and that was going to create change. And I was always interested in sort of those stories. So I think that's the long-winded way of saying that's why I'm where I am now. Like I said, I've worked in a lot of different organizations, doing a lot of different things and wearing a lot of different hats, from development and grant writing, to political advocacy. I worked at Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest, the same affiliate, doing their organizing about 10 years ago. And then I had the very personal and political experience of becoming a parent myself, and knew I wanted to step back and kind of hone my skills as a storyteller. I did some journalism from Univision and AJ Plus. So all of those things have made a really interesting marinade, and that's where I am now.
It's such a really great kind of journey, coming from the Coachella Valley, being able to tie that to how you want to, build your career and move forward. So thank you for sharing. Paloma, do you want to share a bit about kind of what inspired you to enter the nonprofit realm?
Yeah, I think a lot of people who work in nonprofits share this sentiment of I want to do good and I want to enable change. Um, so looking into nonprofits, a lot of passionate people are there because they really want to make a difference. And so I feel like at its core, that is what nonprofits are about in so many different ways. I also feel like, to tag on to what Esperanza said, advocacy is one of the most important, strongest ways that you can connect with nonprofits. I really feel that that is why I went back to school at UCR. I'm getting a Master of Public Policy degree because I really want to understand how advocacy can really enable change.
Absolutely. I will be the first one to push for advocacy. UCR has our own advocacy as a higher education institution. So many of these nonprofits rely on their advocacy arms more than ever. And so thank you for making that plug. Kenny, let's go ahead and move on to you.
Yeah, so just like Esperanza and Paloma said, kind of get into the nonprofit industry because you want to see that change in the world and you want to be able to feel like you're making a difference to some sort of community or person out there. um, for me, after I graduated UCR, I had mentioned, I got a degree in accounting. And so at the time when I was graduating, I kind of just thought to myself, like, well, I'm just going to go into work a 9 to 5, make a decent amount of money, and that will be my life for the rest of my life. Um, it was only like a few months in, I figured out that I could not do that anymore. I personally just felt like I was, in the same sort of repetitive process every day where my work just wasn't meaningful to me and where I wasn't feeling excited or engaged with what I was doing. So really just kind of took a step back from my accounting job and just really asked myself like what it was that I actually wanted to do with, like myself and my life. And that kind of just led me to realizing that I always enjoyed just helping out people and just really wanting to connect to people in that way. So fortunately, I was able to enter the nonprofit world through, at the homeless shelter I was working at in Pasadena. And then from there, slowly just being able to connect with other like minded people and, um, you know, landing where I am today. So just grateful for everyone that's been a part of that journey.
So you kind of lead us nicely into our next question of, you know, what helped shape this journey for some of you, specifically looking at your time at UCR? Um, obviously we have such an amazing student and alumni base that are doing such great things. So, um, how did your time at UCR shape your interest, your readiness for nonprofit work? Paloma, let's go to you because you are back here at UCR.
Yeah. Um, so I came to UCR really looking into creative writing. I came out of high school and I'm a transfer student to UCR. I came out of high school looking, wanting to strengthen that passion I had for writing. And then when I got here, I realized there were so many interesting programs. I couldn't help but want to explore more. So I changed my major to religious studies because it was just opening my eyes to all these different people. UCR is so special in that it's so diverse. There's people from all over the world with so many different experiences that can help shape you, and your experiences help shape them. And so being able to see so much of what's going on in the world really helped me understand, I don't need to silo myself just because I like writing. I don't need to just have the degree in writing. And so it really opened me into thinking, okay, but what else is out there? What else can I try? And I think that is aligned with my career trajectory of trying a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. And now being back at UCR, I came to UCR again because I loved it and I know how supportive everyone at UCR is. But there's just this really intentional look at climate justice and climate policy at UCR. And it's really opening doors for me, looking at advocacy and research and continuing honing in on grant writing, that it's just really bolstering me for what's next.
That's great to hear. And I know UCR has definitely been at the forefront in really the state and both the campus and our leaders, our faculty. So really cool to have you back kind of helping lead the way. Esperanza, can you share a bit more about your experience at UCR?
Absolutely. Yeah, I am so glad to be a Highlander, not to be corny, but I agree with Paloma. I think it's such a unique school, and I got to meet so many cool people, and I think that's really, yeah, what makes it so special. So I always say that my degrees help, especially, so I was an English major first, and then I became really interested in mental health, and added psychology as a second major. But I say that English, especially, and all these literature courses, help me give me like the framework for kind of how I see the world. I mean, I've always been a bookworm, love stories and reading. And so I love to understand. It's helped me and shaped me in understanding. So I use the example of Dr. Lopez earlier. She really gave me that foundation, and so many other professors that I studied under. And I was also really involved on campus. So I was a student and was it student worker? I worked at the Learning Center. So I was an English tutor. Um, and so I was always on campus. I was like part of the Student Homeless Aid Relief Project, or SHARP, at UCR. I was also a camp counselor for the Chicano student program. They had like a migrant ed summer camp experience called PACE, or the Pursuit of Advancement Through a College Experience. So I was always sort of I felt like I was, benefiting from all of these places and spaces, and honestly, people. I always say that I come from a long line of really powerful women and people, and that's true in my family, but it's also true in my career. I can literally look back and see like the warm touches of all the people that have positively influenced my career, from Arlene. I know she's no longer at the Chicano student program office. She just recently moved over to UCLA, but she helped me get my first job over at the library, 'cause she worked there too. And she was like, absolutely, or she's the one that told me about it. And so I think that's, yeah, I think that helped my career. And so the understanding piece, and then also the just involvement piece, like how can I help? How can I roll up my sleeves and help?
We love Arlene, and we're sad to see her go. But I know the Chicano student programs, all of our Costco Hall centers, so many of those resources are so vital to our students still today. So it's great to hear that some of them made an impact for you even a few years ago. Kenny, let's hear a little bit more about your experience at UCR and how it's kind of shaped your process. I know it was accounting, so maybe a little different in the way it did that, but I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah, it's funny actually because when I was at UCR, accounting wasn't even like my first major. I'm pretty sure I switched majors like 4 or 5 times before actually settling on accounting. But um, I think when I was at UCR, really for like the first time in my life, I would have to say that I finally was able to like actually pursue things that I wanted to actually pursue, and to like go after things and make changes that only I wanted to do. I think before coming to UCR, on the like personally, there was felt like there was like a lot of pressure and expectations from maybe parents, families, other people on social media about what success really is and what someone should make a career out of themselves. Oftentimes, like, what when someone asks you like what do you want to be, they expect maybe like to hear the answer of like a doctor, a lawyer, something extraordinary like those jobs. But for me, I think I always knew deep down that that's not something I ever really wanted to do, even though those were kind of pushed onto me. I think just my time at UCR, being able to, meet so many people with such diverse backgrounds, such diverse thoughts, and just sharing in that common experience that, hey, like we're all just trying to figure out what we want to do. And luckily I was able to meet other people who also felt like, like they want to make a difference, that they want to go out and make those kind of changes in the world. And just having that sort of community, like being able to like catch up with them and talk about where we all were at. I think UCR just does a really great job about being inclusive about everyone, and being able to give each student like the courage to be like, hey, you can pursue your passion, and it's okay if you want to change things up later on in life. That's what you should be doing.
Well, it makes me really happy to hear about all of your positive experiences at UCR and how much it really helped you, realize that this is the path and route you want to take and the opportunities that it provided for you. So I know many of our viewers probably feel similarly about their experiences. So thank you all for sharing. We'll pivot a bit now to talk a bit more about your current roles, what you're doing in the nonprofit world. And so, would love to, through the perspective of your experience and your roles you're doing now, love to hear about, how do you ensure that your work remains rooted in the community's needs, equity, and just making sure that it is truly focused on the impact. Obviously, we have very large nonprofits, many of which you're a part of. There's smaller grassroots nonprofits, local, and so obviously, there's a difference between those and how those operate. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, just ensuring that the work you're doing is just kind of continues to focus on the community that you're serving. So let's actually pop over to Esperanza. We'll have you go first.
Absolutely. I work for Planned Parenthood, and I work for the Southern California chapter or affiliate, which is oversees San Diego, Riverside, and Imperial County. So it's a pretty large region geographically, and it's a very diverse region. As you can imagine, the needs in Imperial Valley are very different than those of San Diego County residents. And then I get to do sort of, sometimes it feels with communication that you're just kind of shouting into a void, right? You're just sending out and see what there's, throwing some spaghetti noodles on the wall to see what sticks. And especially now with the level of like political tension and just political attacks really we're having on reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights, all the rights. So it's really challenging, but really rewarding to get to work with communities. And so before this role, I held a lot of different roles, as I mentioned, but some of my favorites have been in coalition. And what that means is you're working with a group of people, usually a large group of people working across different sectors or different organizations and spaces. And you really have to check in with each other to make sure that the work is happening, the work is meaningful, and the work tends to, whatever it is that you're doing that needs to be done and is positively impacting the community. I was also a youth organizer before, so I have that sort of the mind of always checking in with people and making sure that things are, not only am I like a member of this community and a former Planned Parenthood patient and understand the needs, but how do you keep checking in? And that looks like whether it's phone calls, whether it's one-on-ones, whether it's coffee meetings, whether it's attending events. I think that's really important to counteract the like incessant and chronic kind of need to be informed and online and always kind of being up to date with like the news cycle. I think both of those are important. Both of those are true.
That news cycle is tough. I totally recognize that. But yeah, I think the coalition building, working across orgs, at the end of the day, nonprofit folks are stretched thin, and the more we can work together is wonderful. So thanks for sharing, Kenny.
Yeah. So currently, right now, I work at the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army itself, it's a international organization that serves in 170, 180 plus countries or so. So it's very easy to kind of just lose that perspective and maybe easily think that you're just part of just huge conglomerate, just huge organization. And so, one thing I think I really just kind of like to remind myself, and something I really learned from like my previous nonprofit experience, working at a more grassroots organization that was serving those who are unhoused, was just, connecting to like the mission itself and asking yourself, like, do you really feel good about the work that you're doing every day? Um, for me right now, I serve in like a marketing role. And so, you know, that's sort of more on like the back end side of like the nonprofit world. I'm not necessarily going out into the field, interacting with those in need, or, visiting like disaster hit areas, across the United States. But just recognizing that, my role is important, as much as those who are out in the field too. Because of me and my team, we're able to, get the word out about what our most current needs are, what donations could really help us right now. Spreading just overall awareness about those who really need it. And, just really finding kind of like that joy again, and just recognizing that, hey, like, even though I'm not necessarily out there, and as much as I would love to be, like, my work is still making a difference for those that I may be indirectly touching or affecting.
Thank you for sharing, Kenny. Paloma, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, working when I used to be a program manager at a botanical garden, I got to work with education and work with children and plant plants. And there's definitely this feeling of not needing the reminder because you get to do it every day, but also the feeling of, but I'm not doing enough. But how could I be helping more? And now working remotely and working for all of the state of California, it I do get that sense like I'm doing a lot. We have so many projects going. I really love my role that I get to be part of so many different teams and be helping on so many different land areas across California. I get to be a part of creating green schoolyards for children and having land return back to tribes. And even if I'm not presently there, I still feel a sense of accomplishment and helping them, but then missing the sense of, oh, I wish I was on the ground again. So I feel like there's always this duality of feeling that you're not doing enough, and you always want to do more, especially in nonprofits.
That is a valid point, which actually can transition us to the next question. The burnout, that motivation is real in this realm, and working these long hours, and a lot of times for little pay, and seeing some pretty tough things in some of these nonprofits too. So, how do you all stay motivated and avoid? I say avoid burnout. Burnout is real. And then, especially when working on some of these challenging issues or during challenging times. Um, let's see, Kenny, maybe we'll start off with you and sharing kind of out how do you look at avoiding burnout and keeping motivated?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's very real for sure. Like, having burnout, or, feeling like there are days where you just feel unmotivated, or just thinking like, oh man, like this sucks. Like, why can't I do more? Um, but I think, overall, I think it's just very helpful for me just to be able to like talk to people about it, and, connect with others, who are like-minded in your field. Being able to, talk about things, work through things, and, just kind of, every now and then reminding yourself that, like, hey, like, you can't fix all the problems in one day. You can't fix all the problems in the world. It's kind of funny, like, for us who are like working in the like the nonprofit sector, like we're like one of the few folks who are working to try to like end our jobs, really. We're trying to come up with a solution where, like, you're ending homelessness, or, you're ending hunger or something like that. Of course, ideally it would happen one day, but, you know the work still needs to be done. And I think just kind of keeping that in mind, like, hey, like, you're working towards something that you really want to, change, and just being grateful for that kind of opportunity that, like, hey, I get to do something that's very fulfilling, and being able to, again, just kind of connect and be around like-minded people. I think it just really just kind of gives me that, like, sort of like energy and just excitement just to be, doing what I love doing.
Yeah, I think that community within the field is important and really is a great way to re-energize. Well, Paloma, thoughts on avoiding burnout, keeping motivated?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Kenny. um, I think that constant need to be reminded that you're not in on this alone. It's not just you and your one org working on this to solve these very critical issues. And that's why I love mixers and networking and coalitions, to Esperanza's point, being able to get together with folks who are all trying to solve the same problems in so many different ways. Going to conferences is very inspiring to me because I get to see all these different innovative solutions, and it adds to that feeling that you're not doing this alone. There's so many people out there working with you, even if you're not thinking of them.
And Esperanza, thoughts from you?
Yeah, such a good point that Kenny made about how we are, a lot of us come into this nonprofit work like with this vision, right? Of, and big vision, big picture idea of like ending world hunger or helping, create a world where everybody has access to the rights and the reproductive health care that they need and deserve, right? And so I think the best way that what I've done personally to avoid burnout is actually, so I've tried a bunch of things. I think I mentioned before I was a youth organizer, and we used to have these group agreements, right? Where before a meeting we would say like, this is a safe space, don't yuck my yum, things like that. And one of the things that we would say is like, move your feet. And I think that's what I've done throughout my career. I've moved my feet away from things that didn't feel good anymore, or moved my feet towards issues that I really cared about, that really kind of burned that light for me. And reproductive rights has always been that for me. Outside of my 9 to 5, I'm also a doula in the community, which is like a traditional birth worker. So I'm really, really passionate about providing support and giving space to all people that want to have children or not want to have children, and like families and things like that. So um, I think that's kind of the thing that I've learned the most, is just maybe what do they say, like, good for her or good for them, not for me. I tried like housing justice work, and that's really important work, but it wasn't really for me. I've done a little bit of environmental justice work, same thing, good for them, amazing that Paloma's doing it, but also not for me. So really just trying to get as specific as possible, and then once you find sort of that issue area that you really love, how can you get even more specific with the work that you're doing? Because they'll try to throw all the things at you, community organizing and development and grant writing, but it's like, that's not for me. I really love storytelling, and that's what I'm doing now.
Those are great points, and I agree. I think nonprofits, the hats just keep coming. And so being able to figure out what it is you really want to do, what your passion area is, and there's obviously overlapping coalitions where you can work on other topic areas and stuff, but it's hard to give yourself to everything, because then what are you really giving? So I think those are great points. Thank you all for sharing. And it's definitely helpful, because I know a lot of folks are probably feeling the burnout right now if they're in a nonprofit or even volunteering, maybe not working full time. So I think that's great advice. So turning to like the roles themselves and kind of the day-to-day of the work that you do. A lot of our folks here are either maybe wanting to learn how to get into the nonprofit sector, or maybe looking to pivot or do something else in the nonprofit sector. So, what skills have been most critical to your success in the field? If someone's thinking of maybe things they should be sharpening, skills wise, that could better prepare them for, a job search in the nonprofit sector. And I will note that Paloma, when you do share a bit about yours, we did have a question in the Q&A about your work with environmental justice, and just want to know a bit more about the name of the organization and some of the work. So maybe as you share those skills, maybe also sharing a bit about more of the work, because I do think Kitty and Esperanza's organizations are a little more mainstream and maybe a lot more known, but I think folks would love to hear a bit more about your specific work, Paloma. So let's actually start with you.
Okay, that sounds great. I'll keep that in mind. First, I wanted to share what inspired me to move into the environmental justice sphere. There is a marine biologist who went into policy advocacy. Her name's Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, and she created this idea of a Venn diagram. What are the and these are for people who want to transition into nonprofit, we can say generally, or environmental justice nonprofits specifically. What are the skills you already have? What are the skills you are already confident in? And how can you apply that to what you're passionate about? So for me, I was really into creative writing, essays, poetry, everything in high school, and was really encouraged to go to college to continue on that. And just like Esperanza said, good for writers, not for me. Not really into the creative writing anymore, but I had all these skills already. Coupling that with loving research and wanting to always learn more and figure out problems, it was really great to get into grant writing. So my current organization I work for is called Trust for Public Land. We're a public land trust, and we do not actually hold any land. What we do is we fundraise in order to acquire land from privately owned areas and turn that into public spaces. And then we also work in park development and green schoolyards within urban areas. And a lot of these grants are at the federal level or at the state level, county measures, and are very technical. I had to do a brownfield grant. So for those who don't know, brownfields are land spaces that have become toxic because of the industry's use of them. And so now they're vacant, but there's still this toxicity, and we have to have a solution of what to do with it. So part of what we did at Trust for Public Land is we helped a school district in California who owned this toxic land figure out how to remediate it through natural ways and then be able to turn it into a farm for the community to use. We had to write all these grants for the Department of Toxic Substances Control. I myself, as a grant writer, had to learn all about hexacium, chromium, everything that you can think of, lead, all these things just on my own. I had to learn about redlining. I had to learn about how freeways were intentionally put in Black and Brown communities. I had to add all of this knowledge and research into writing for the state and federal government in order for them to, create a report and say, okay, yes, we will fund this project. So it's this balance between all these different uses that I love, and it's just perfect for me.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for the amazing work that y'all are doing. I think that's obviously, I mean, you're all doing such amazing work, but I think that is, very unique, and it's a wonderful tie to those skills. I think, sometimes people don't think of, I love writing, I can help, secure funds for organizations through my writing.
Mm-hmm.
When looking at, skills, let's go to Kenny. You do digital content now, you've worked in events and volunteer management. What are some skills you kind of throw out there as ways that folks, when looking for that role, some advice on what they could be looking for and kind of sharpening those skills to get a role?
Yeah. So I think, the one thing I'll say is that, every day, like I'm still learning something new. I'm still trying to pick up on things and, develop my skills as we go or as I go. Um, I think the one thing that's really neat about the nonprofit space in general, as Esperanza and Paloma have like already touched on, are that oftentimes people working in this industry wear a lot of different hats. So you meet people with very diverse backgrounds who come from all different sorts of previous jobs and experiences before. But the one thing that really ties us all in common is that, everyone has kind of like that same sort of like-minded mindset of where, we're trying to help people out, trying to build community and, contribute to society in some sort of meaningful way. Personally, for like my experience as, being like a digital marketer, fortunately, I had some experience with, what helped me out a lot was like graphic design work. Also, just being able to take some sort of marketing classes while I was at UCR too. But I think overall, really just being able to connect and talk with my coworkers and other peers in my community. Because, outside of those few classes and that sort of like, minimum graphic design experience, I really didn't have anything to really know about marketing, especially for a nonprofit. But just going out there and talking to people and really just like asking them like what they do, like what are some tips, like going to webinars like this one, and just being able to connect with those kind of people. I think really, I would say that's really what helped me out the most, and just keeping that sort of open mind, and then knowing that anyone can work in the nonprofit space. It doesn't matter, what degree you hold, what other experiences you may have had previously. There's always going to be a role that fits your skills, what you bring to the table, because really, maybe no one else can bring what you can. And so I think, if you are interested in working in the nonprofit space, I'd say totally go for it. It's super fun and rewarding. Talk to other people, connect with Esperanza, connect with Paloma after this call. I'm sure they can all give you some really helpful advice too.
Thank you, Kenny. And then Esperanza, thoughts on ways folks can kind of get into this field or skills they can be looking at?
Yeah, great. So recently my department, we did like a behavioral kind of disc assessment where we were kind of categorized into these different spaces. And and we all got maybe defensive about our different personality traits. Some people are more assertive and aggressive, and absolutely they are. And then I was sort of in this other space that's a little bit more conscientious, a little bit more reserved. And so I think there comes a point where, or there came a point where I knew I was always a strong writer, for example, even through high school. Um, and I kind of lived with this maybe fear, right? Like this fear of not wanting others to read my writing, or not wanting others to know what I'm thinking, and so I would encourage, and probably the most important skill that I've learned is to just push past that fear, live without fear. They're an activist, I think their name is Maggie Kuhn. They said, like, leave safety behind, put your body on the line, stand before the people you fear, and speak your mind. Even if your voice shakes, I think a lot of times my voice probably shakes. Um, Whether that's like the voice of a newsletter that's being sent out to hundreds of thousands of people, or in front of, traditional media spaces. I think just easier said than done, totally admit that, but pushing past whatever fear or reservations or kind of fear of a commitment to something. You don't have to necessarily marry the job that you're in. You can always, like I said, move your feet and try something different if it's not for you, and just don't be afraid to whatever that little contribution that you want to give, whatever that little ember is for you. We need you. All of these different movements, we're all intersected, and we need all the help we can get at this point.
Well, I think that's a great point too, knowing that, for all these nonprofits, if you're unsure if this is a organization or something you want to be a part of, they all have volunteer opportunities that are a great way to get a foot in the door, learn about the organizations more, see what the culture is like. Sometimes the first step to getting a role is just being involved in the organization, having folks recognize your face, and being able to yourself be able to see what it is like and be a part of that in a volunteer capacity. So, sometimes becoming a volunteer first is a great way to kind of determine if the nonprofit world is for you. So also want to just kind of throw that out there. Just a reminder that we do have a few minutes left. If you have questions, throw them down in our Q&A. So we have a few questions. So I'm going to kind of combine some of these. And it actually is one of the questions we actually have around, just what advice you have for Highlanders interested in working in a nonprofit and finding of opportunity that fits for them. So we've had a few questions kind of talking about this. So we've got, advice on where to find a first step when finding work after graduation. Do you think a LinkedIn profile is a must-have to pursue employment opportunities? Um, and are there any certifications a Gen X career changer should consider, project management certificate, etc.? So it looks like a lot of our questions are about, how do folks kind of best prepare themselves for a role and kind of looking at maybe more resource based or just some of those technical questions. So um, kind of merged all our questions in one, but they were all very kind of similar in a very kind of similar conversation. So does anyone want to kind of kick us off? I know this one's a little more technical, so I'll kind of open it up for whoever wants to go first. Looks like Kenny wants to go.
Yeah, I can speak on that. So, I think just from my personal experience, when I was first applying to a role, within the nonprofit space, the first role I got was as a volunteer coordinator for the homeless shelter I was working at in Pasadena. And then from there, I was able to get promoted to like a manager role of volunteers and then event manager and then marketing manager. And then I transferred over to the Salvation Army after that. From like a technical standpoint, I think, LinkedIn is always very helpful to have, and then for me, how I applied basically was like so many other people, really, if I'm being honest, mass applying, as much as I could through like Indeed, for example, or on LinkedIn. I think just being like vigilant, um, and and it sucks, but just reminding yourself that, unfortunately, you won't hear back from every job opportunity that you apply to, but eventually, like I'm like 100% certain, like you will eventually hear back from a few. Um, and as far as, kind of building on more like skills, for me, especially for like my marketing roles, I had experience with like Photoshop and Illustrator, graphic design work, which kind of helped me get into that marketing role. But then, there's a lot more to marketing than just making pretty graphics. There's, databases, learning like, you know, coding like HTML, CSS. So for me, I'm always just like on, for example, Coursera is a really good resource for if you want to learn more like technical skills as far as from like marketing or even just like other technical aspects of a role. I think also just being able to um, also apply to like local classes that you might find interesting, whether at UCR or at like a local community college. I think for me, just always wanting to keep learning after I graduated. So, I would attend classes at my local community college just around like maybe coding or just other marketing strategies or practices. And for me, just trying to find classes that were also affordable. So, just kind of always keeping an open mind about what you want to do. And if there's something that you really want to go for and you don't have the experience, I think just being able to like talk to people and can make those connections and, um, you know, just keeping your mind engaged.
Well, thank you, Kenny. I will also note in finding all three of these panelists, I use LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a very valid tool, one for your own networking, but also to be able to, you do the outreach. You can search on LinkedIn by UCR alumni in different fields, and it's an easy way to build your network, reach out, connect, make these connections. So I will just note that that's how we did with these three here. So I definitely am a person that suggests LinkedIn and keeping it updated. Esperanza.
Mm-hmm. I don't have an answer for the technical piece, but I think I to your point about LinkedIn, I do think your digital, fortunately slash unfortunately, your digital kind of footprint really matters. So I got a lot of opportunities because I had like a digital portfolio. And it was really a blog. I really wanted to start kind of a space where I could showcase, similar to Paloma, I've always loved writing. So showcase my writing, and I was really curious about, again, stories in my community. And I didn't really have anywhere for them to live. So I created a blog, and one of the first, I don't know how often this happens. Maybe I was just right place, right time, and very, very lucky. Or my writing was sparkling and wonderful, whatever. I got a call from Univision saying, "Hey, we know you're a really great writer. We read your blog. We'd love to have you join our, part of this writing team." And it was a very specific project that was tailored to like a younger demographic. And I got some really cool opportunities to share a story on the way pesticides impact reproductive health in the Coachella Valley, specifically and farm workers, everywhere. So lots of really cool opportunities that came from, again, carving out that digital footprint.
Perfect. Just real quick, I know there was a question about certifications, anything like that. Is there anything that comes to top of mind for folks? I know if you do want to be a fundraiser, there are specific trainings and certifications folks can go through if that's the route you want to go. Obviously, we've learned today being in a nonprofit does not mean that you are a frontline fundraiser. That's obviously an opportunity, but the work is happening in a lot of other ways too. So just wanted to see if there are any certifications, trainings, things like that that are pretty specific you could, suggest to folks.
Yeah, I can go. I get asked that a lot. People are very interested in a career shift towards grant writing these days.
Yeah.
If you believe the certificate or class will help you hone those skills, then that could be beneficial. But I've never seen anyone ask for a certificate. I've never seen that as part of the hiring process. When I was hired, I had to submit writing samples, but there was no interest in whether I had a certificate or not. So if you think that it could help you create those samples or those skills, then go for it. But it is not necessary in order to apply.
Yeah, and I think to what Paloma just said, how certificate isn't really necessary when you're applying. I think if you do want to get a certificate in some sort of technical aspect, you can get that while you're at the job. I think, for example, like right now, I'm like working on like a certificate for like just like Java, and queries. And so I think oftentimes, like once you get your foot in the door, you can kind of build on those skill sets. I know that when I was in volunteer management, there's also a certificate for, volunteer management, but again, that wasn't necessary for me to get the role. And then, once you're in the role, oftentimes other people in that profession, like volunteer management, were already working towards getting their certificate once they already had that role. So again, to like Paloma's point, not totally necessary, but if you do think it would be helpful to get, then totally go for it.
Absolutely. So obviously some of the work y'all do is hard and tough in a lot of ways, but we're running out of little time, so you can kind of keep this one a little shorter, but I'd love to hear, what's been one of the most rewarding experiences of your nonprofit career so far? And we'll want to end on a kind of positive note for folks. Paloma, I see you shaking your head. Want to share your most rewarding experience so far?
It's hard. It's really hard to pick one. I think just one thing I'm really horrible at is celebrating successes. It's something I'm trying to get better at. So what I usually do is just move from one project. Great, we did that. What's next? And I think that could also, going back to the burnout question, can lead to burnout if you're constantly in that mode. So for me, working in land protection, nonprofit, being able to remind myself to go out into the land, into trails, maybe into trails for conservancies that we've partnered with, and to just be in that space and be able to breathe in fresh air, that helps me stay grounded and reminded, like, oh yeah, we did this. There's one actually in Coachella Valley that we did where there's a breeding ground for bighorn sheep. And so that's on my list. Or I know a lot of my coworkers have gone out to just go see the bighorn sheep, and it's like, yeah, we did that. Those babies, we made that happen. So that's something that's definitely worth celebrating.
Kenny, would you like to share?
Yeah. I think, of course, like every day, you're just so grateful to be in the position that you're in. But again, to Paloma's point, I think sometimes it's hard to, remind yourself to celebrate, even those like small victories. And, I think the first time is like for me, when I like realized that like, oh my gosh, like I love being where I'm at was, when I first started off as like a volunteer coordinator. This was like right when COVID hit, so like March, April 2020. All of our kitchens kind of closed down, so it was at very limited capacity. We could only maybe have like a few staff and a couple handful of volunteers on site to prepare hundreds of meals every day for folks. But just being there, with those who were coming in, with those volunteers who, they're volunteers. They weren't being paid to come in. Nothing was, uh, you know, no one was telling them that you have to come in during this crazy time to help these people out. Um, but just being able to connect with them and just seeing that the joy and the smile that they brought every day, and especially when engaging with our folks who are living at the shelter, that was just a moment for me where I was just like, wow, like this feels good. Like being able to work with these kind of people, who again just want to give a little bit of their time every day just to help out. Even if it's not, changing the lives of 1 million people, if it's changing the life of just one person, that's an incredible win of itself.
Absolutely, definitely a win. Esperanza.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Every day that we're able to keep our health center doors open, for example, in my current role is a win. It feels like a win. But I think the experience that I want to share that was really rewarding and is rooted in kind of finding solutions and moving away from this like kind of and not incessant, but need to complain about the way things are, or maybe insistence, or like the way that we're maybe programmed as humans to sort of say like, oh, that's bad, or that could be better. It and really dig into how we can make things better and work with these people. So I mentioned the Coachella Fest, the Coachella Music and Arts Fest, or Coachella Fest. When I was a youth organizer under a program called Building Healthy Communities, which was a large project, statewide project, we had a group of young people who were like, hey, we've never been able to afford Coachella Fest. Why don't we make our own? So that gave birth to something called the Hue Fest, and it became this huge thing where we had it was all free for the community based in the Eastern Coachella Valley. We had 3 stages, local musicians, local artists, and we got a partnership with Golden Voice to get our young people in on the Coachella Fest campus or the Empire Polo Grounds to tour the art installations and attend the festival and create their own art installation on the premises too. So really just kind of solutions based and collaboration, the power of collaboration and solutions and people and young people too.
Amazing. Well, I wish we could talk for hours. Honestly, I think this is just a small hour snapshot of your roles, your experiences and journeys, but really appreciate everyone for your transparency, your willingness to be genuine and authentic with your experiences and sharing tips and advice for folks. We'll make sure for folks that you get LinkedIn profiles for each of our um, panelists so you can reach out and connect and be able to continue the conversation. Because again, this is just a small snapshot of what they do and their roles. But just want to, on behalf of the University of California, Riverside, thank everyone for joining us today for our Industry Insights event. It was a real pleasure to connect virtually with our panelists. Appreciate you all for making the time to be a part of today's event and for helping our panelists gain, hopefully, or our attendees gain some valuable advice. Again, thanking Esperanza, Kinsey, and Paloma for your time and for giving back to your UCR community. We're very proud of the work that you all are doing as Highlanders, and the insights, advice that you've all shared today are, just make us especially proud that you're part of our community. So all of our attendees will receive a follow-up email containing a recording of this webinar at a future date. Please visit alumni.ucr.edu/career services for further details on upcoming episodes of different industries. And I do want to just plug our advocacy here at UC Riverside, as we've heard. Again, higher education is in itself nonprofit and is one of, unfortunately, the areas that continues to be under attack regarding funds and a number of other areas. And so we have our Highlander Advocacy Network, which I actually oversee here at UCR, that works to really mobilize our alumni to be advocates, to go up to Sacramento and advocate for higher education funding, to advocate for support to UCR to be able to help the healthcare disparities in the Inland Empire region. There's a lot of ways to get involved as an advocate. And so just want to do a little plug there. You can also find all that information on our website, alumni.ucr.edu. We'll also share these links in a follow-up email. But just thank everyone again for joining us today and hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.